EMT will not get you into med school, but being a medical translator very well might. Over the last 7 years, I've helped thousands of premeds quit terrible clinical experiences and replace them with those that stand out. So here are 12 clinical experiences that will always stand out, some for the wrong reasons. I ranked them, starting with number 1. Hospice volunteer. Hospice is a type of palliative care for individuals with a terminal illness. Its primary goal is to provide the patient and the family with comfort and quality of life. I did this for a summer in San Diego and saw a ton of different patients, from patients living in a facility who had a weekend to live. I also did home visits where patients lived their last few months by their loved ones. In hospice, you learn that there's no universal definition of health. Patients define what they want out of their care. For example, I remember Dave, who told me that his favorite meal in the world was a grilled cheese sandwich with a tomato bisque soup. And honestly, by most medical standards, Dave shouldn't be eating. He was weak, he could very well choke on his food and get a serious lung infection. But under hospice and comfort care, our job was, as safely as possible, to give Dave the highest quality of life. And so I actually remember picking up the grilled cheese and tomato soup. I remember cutting the grilled cheese for Dave into the tiniest pieces and helping the guy enjoy the meal slowly. I saw him on Friday, and when I came back on Monday, they had told me that Dave passed away that weekend. Ultimately, I'm truly happy that his last days were filled with joy. Hospice also teaches you that medicine is filled with difficult conversations. I remember doing a home visit for a Vietnamese family whose loved one was transitioning from full invasive medical care to comfort care at home. And the last thing they had to peel off for the patient were her tube feeds. The sheer volume of tube feeds was causing her to swell up, and it made her breathing very uncomfortable. And so I remember being in the room when the palliative care physician had a tough conversation about finally withdrawing their tube feeds. I remember the family asking, but how will our loved one regain her strength if she's not being fed? There were so many other examples of honest, emotional questions, and ultimately, I saw the palliative care physician get on the same page with the family, that their loved one's comfort was the most important thing, and withdrawing tube feeds didn't mean that you were giving up on her, it just meant that you were prioritizing her comfort. Hospice volunteering will give you a very nuanced, mature perspective on medicine, and for that, it gets an A. 12 of these clinical experiences are from real premeds I've worked with over the last 7 years. And seeing real, strong extracurriculars are the only way that I know what AdComs truly want to see. We have 8 full AMCAS applications that earn acceptances to some of the best programs in the country. And over 18,500 premeds are part of our community. To join, click the link in the description box below now. Number 2. Clinical research coordinator. Most clinical research coordinators spend their days organizing research documents, consenting patients, gathering data, and ultimately keeping the trains running on time. Being a great research coordinator does require you to intimately understand the problems that are within medicine so that you can explain it to lay people. I also find that most people underestimate how difficult it is to truly consent patients. Remember that patients are at the hospital or in clinic because they are sick, and convincing them to do anything extra in a season where they're most vulnerable and a lot is up in the air teaches you how to truly communicate. We have a student whose research involves looking at a patient's biomarker after they've had a heart attack. And he writes about how walking into those rooms, speaking to a patient who wasn't sure if they were going to be alive in the last couple of hours, seeing family members go through the reality that at any point in time their loved one could drop dead, that certainly is not an easy room to have a conversation. But he writes about how he realized that at the core of all the clinical research, at the center of all the data, were real people and real families experiencing real illness. That's a very strong, mature takeaway and a very nuanced perspective on what medicine means to so many people. On top of all this, most clinical research coordinators work full-time and they're paid to do it, so you can rack up a ton of hours and keep yourself afloat while in it. But to be fair, most clinical research coordinators do not spend a lot of time doing clinical experiences. It's certainly not a traditional clinical experience, and most of the time it's computers and logistics work. Being a clinical research coordinator is a great role, but it is not perfect, so it gets a B. Number 3, a global health intern. Pre-med internships abroad are a week to a month-long program where you spend time in another country servicing their community's public health and medical needs. Often you're performing out of scope because physical supplies are low and trained personnel are even lower. I've met students who hadn't even taken biochemistry yet, and somehow they're interviewing real patients in a language they don't speak and presenting the case to a physician, the sole physician, for hundreds of sick patients. Volunteerism has gotten a terrible reputation of late, and I think for good reason. These communities are often highly dependent on foreign aid, so the second your camp leaves, there's not really a great system for longitudinal care. It's a vicious cycle where sometimes the Americans there feel like they're saving lives, but when they leave, the community becomes indefinitely dependent on them. I have never been on a medical mission, so I cannot comment from personal experience. I can only share with you what I've seen over the last 7 years, and oftentimes, medical mission trips do not stand out for the right reason. Of the thousands of applications I've read, I personally have very rarely read any global health experience that was well written. Rarely do they talk about medicine in a nuanced, mature way, and it's understandable because their version of medicine is highly skewed. It's dramatic, it's life-saving, and everything seems like an emergency. And it paints doctors as the heroes of society, worthy of all the riches and all the respect. And if a pre-med comes back to America entering medical school expecting to have those roles in society, it can be very damaging and dangerous for them when patients don't see you that way. I've had patients in the emergency room that are cursing and don't even look you in the eye because they've been burned in the past. I've had patients curse and spit at me when what I told them was not what they wanted to hear. Global health pre-med internships for these reasons get an F. And if you were planning to do an abroad pre-med trip, well, there you go. I saved you thousands of dollars an entire summer. And it's this attention to detail that separates pre-meds who get into medical school from those who don't. If you're applying to medical school in the coming year or two, you don't want to make the wrong decisions. Our pre-med Catalyst students who apply on time have a 100% acceptance rate. That's more than double the national average. And our results are because we work so closely with students. In fact, we can only take on 4 students per month until we're full. If you'd be interested in getting into some of the strongest programs in the country, click the application cycle advising link now to book a free strategy call before we're full for the cycle. Number 4, caseworker or health advocate. A caseworker at UCLA for the Mobile Clinic Project involves speaking to people experiencing homelessness, getting a sense of what their needs are, and creatively finding ways to fund, to support, to close the gap in their socioeconomic and health disparities. Maybe they don't have clean socks or shoes, and because of that, they continue to get foot infections. Maybe they're working towards sobriety, but aren't quite there yet, and need places to safely exchange needles so they don't contract HIV, HCV, or any other blood-borne illness. You work with real people, and you get to know their real stories. Whenever I read about these experiences, I find them very humbling. I'm honestly envious of the students that get to participate, because how often are we in the position for our social dynamics, our inherent power dynamics to be dissolved like that? How often can you say and truly believe that your life is better after serving another person? When's the last time you heard anyone say that they learned a ton from a homeless person? Another similar type of experience is a health advocate, which one of our students did up in Northern California for a community hospital. In this role, she helps patients who have comorbid issues outside of their health. For example, she tells a story of her helping a patient apply for state disability insurance, helping her family get approval for food stamps, and helping her apply for emergency Medi-Cal and emergency housing vouchers. This is real work that supports the underserved immigrant populations, communities of people who have trouble accessing healthcare. Doing real work serving communities that are most in need teach you to be resourceful. It also forces you to reset your perspectives and intimately understand how much it means for some of these communities to receive care, to have a consistent longitudinal base of healthcare they can rely on. Those lessons make some of the best medical students and certainly makes the best doctors. For those reasons, these experiences get an S. Number 5, behavioral therapist or a health coach. This is a clinical experience I've seen become more common over the last couple of years. It's traditionally done in a setting where you're working with children who are neurodivergent. You're helping them meet motor and social milestones. You work with a panel of these kids week to week for up to a couple of years. And I think the central beauty of these experiences is that you get to be with a person as they grow and develop, as they hit their accomplishments and struggle through their obstacles. In college, I also served as a health coach. This is a similar type of experience where you're working with someone through some determined duration of time. For me, I worked with patients over 16 weeks to help them lose weight. And in this extracurricular, I served patients like Ben. I learned Ben's story. He's a hardworking man in the entertainment industry. And he wanted to be a healthier version of himself for the family members who were concerned about him. Most importantly, I think he just wanted to feel better in his own skin. He told me the story about why he refuses to wear white. There was one day in sunny Los Angeles where he was walking along the sidewalk in a white t-shirt. He was a little bigger guy and was really quite hot, and so his shirt stuck to his skin. He remembers looking across the sidewalk and seeing these 2 young females who were pointing and laughing at him. He remembers that scene as clear as day, and to this day, he doesn't wear white. He removed it from his closet entirely. These experiences, you start to really understand people and why their health matters so much to them. And it's only because you get to work with them for such a long period of time. A lot of the best doctors share these same character traits that you develop in these clinical experiences. Ability to work with someone through their ups and downs. Consistency to show up and recognize that most health issues are not solved in a single visit. Satisfaction and enjoyment that comes from seeing your patient hit milestones along the way. Unfortunately though, these clinical experiences can be a little harder to get, but for all the good things, it deserves an A. Medical experience number 6, hospital volunteer. I spent 343 hours in a blue polo and khaki pants every Saturday morning watching the clock tick as my life drained away in front of me. No one knew I was coming in. No one cared that I left. Honestly, all I did was wipe down a table to make it look like I did something. Maybe once a month, a nurse would look at me and ask if I could drop some water off to the patient in room 11. And honestly, I didn't mind. That was probably the highlight of my entire month. Don't get me wrong, that role was actually a promotion. The start of my hospital volunteering was me as a greeter, where I spent 50 hours at the front door of the Ronald Reagan UCLA hospital. And every time those automatic doors opened up to a doctor, a medical student, a patient, or a patient's family member, I had to stand there, hands in my lap, and say, welcome in, hello, good to see you again. For me, and for many hundreds, if not thousands of pre-meds I've worked with, hospital volunteering is largely passive. What's worse, it was demeaning and humiliating for my own self-worth. And maybe I'm a little skeptical, but to me, it's just some way for the hospital to get free labor. Many students online have said that their experiences are different, and I believe them. I just had not had that experience, nor have ever worked with students who had that experience. So for these reasons, hospital volunteering gets an F. Number 7, EMT. When we think of EMTs, we think of those blaring ambulance lights, flying through traffic, and getting to a scene at the very second you can save a life. If you throw in an IV, you emergently intubate the patient, you push a bunch of drugs, and you're pouring blood. All of your training in one to save a life in the field. And of course, that's much closer to television than it is to reality. Many EMT pre-meds, they spend thousands of dollars and months of training only to never get the job. Certification is a bunch of unapplied textbook knowledge they think AdComs want to see. And even if you do get the job, most EMTs spend a lot of their time transferring patients from the nursing home to the hospital. Maybe they check in on a scenario where everything is already quite stabilized. And look, all those things are real. They're valuable for society, and it's truly actual hands-on patient care. But I think the contrast between what people expect and what they actually get on the job is quite substantial. More than that, over the last 20 years, I feel like everyone and their mothers is an EMT. It's become the go-to one-size-fit-all solution. And the problem there is that most pre-meds have no interest in acute or critical care. Another issue is that many pre-meds find that there are severe diminishing returns after, say, 500 hours. But for the most part, most of it will be routine, and an additional 1,500 hours won't really make a substantial difference. Now, if you do really care about critical care and seeing how the various communities and zip codes you serve have different needs, then being an EMT can be a fantastic fit for you. We have a student who has engaged in state level, national level policy to offer EMTs more training. He has written about how different boroughs of New York seem like different worlds, even though they're only separated by a couple of miles. And of all the hundreds of EMTs I have seen and read about, he's the one pre-med who made EMT his true S-tier clinical experience. Because the variation is so wide, because so many pre-meds depend on EMT being their sole phenomenal experience, I believe EMT gets you a B. Number 8, medical assistant. This is one of the most traditional clinical experiences where you're an active, engaged member of a clinic. You check in patients, maybe run their insurance, check their vitals, and get a sense of why they may be visiting today. Often you don't have all the information. There's probably not enough time really to read all of their history, get a sense of all their other visits before seeing your doctor, especially because you got 50 patients to see in a single morning. This is hands-on clinical experience, and you will meet many patients. And just by sheer volume, you'll really get to know some people. And equally as important, you'll be pretty crystal clear on a clinic's workflow. But it does have similar problems to being an EMT. There's an upper ceiling of growth. After about 500 hours, you know that when a patient says that they have knee pain, you're probably already going to the back, getting the needles, getting the medications, and setting it up for your doctor to go do the injection while they're in the room. You have become an integral part of the clinic workflow and the team. and that is fantastic for your learning and growth. Sometimes you're learning more about the medical jargon, which isn't really that applicable at this stage of your medical training. That being said, medical assistants are often paid. You get to see patients over time and log many hours. You learn what it's like to have your effort translate to real progress in clearing out a busy clinic schedule. But again, you cannot depend on this being your sole clinical experience. After all, I think it's good. It's certainly not great. So for these reasons, it gets a B. Clinical experience number 9, nursing assistant. Nursing assistants can work some difficult shifts. Their roles are never glorious. They're turning patients to the side so that they can clean the patients who have soiled themselves. They're helping physical therapists walk patients around the unit. They may be one-to-one sitters for patients who are a danger to themselves or danger to other people. Nursing assistants see a lot of the ugly parts of healthcare, and they're actively involved in what most people want nothing to do with, including the nurses, including the doctors, including everyone else in healthcare. Every time I've worked with a pre-med who has been a nursing assistant, I've really appreciated the level of maturity and the nuance that the student brings. They may not know what a Mobitz type 2 block is, but they appreciate just how difficult it is to take care of someone. They understand when patients are in a season of vulnerability, it takes more than just a doctor sitting behind a computer typing in some orders for that person to receive actual care. So there's an appreciation of auxiliary staff. There's a level of work ethic and ability to quiet the ego. I think most importantly, there's just this understanding that the work in healthcare may not be glorious, but for the team to move on and the patient to get what they deserve, it needs to be done. And although no one wants to do it, you're willing to step up to get the job done. Patient stories from being a nursing assistant are some of the strongest ones I've ever read. And I think it's an experience, one of the few clinical experiences that tell pre-meds that you don't actually need to know medicine at this stage of your pre-med journey. Medical schools have been teaching medicine for millennia. We know now that doctors are more than multiple choice questions. So instead, AdComs are now selecting for pre-meds with certain character traits. There are important traits: perseverance, communication, coachability, and these are only built through experiences like this. On top of that, they get paid. They can rack up many hours in a healthcare setting. So for me, being a nursing assistant is an S-tier clinical experience. Number 10, scribe. Scribes are in the exact clinical environments that medical assistants are in. The difference though is that scribes are kind of like the white collar version. They traditionally sit behind the keyboard, they roll in a little portable computer, and they spend the entire day with the clinician jotting down some notes. An effective scribe is someone who knows how to use the computer well and knows how to listen to some key pieces of information. But most often nowadays, clinic visits are so templatized, so standardized that really you become kind of like a note monkey. Scribes do have a good understanding of what physicians do from beginning to end. While they are involved in the care of patients, I would argue that they're not as actively or directly involved as a medical assistant or a nursing assistant. In addition, becoming a scribe requires training, often costs money and many months of time. Really, that's just how to use a computer, how to use the medical software, and maybe some basic terminology of medical jargon. I just think that the money invested, the time investment, and the learning that you get from the activity, specifically medically related things, doesn't really build the character traits that medical schools are truly interested in. A lot of scribes, when they write about their activity, they talk about the complex diagnoses they've seen. And they share their understanding of big, fancy things like aortic stenosis. And again, while that's nice, it kind of misses the point, because it's not your season to be learning low flow, low gradient stenoses. It's your season to be developing the character traits that would be a solid foundation for a career as a doctor. For these reasons, being a scribe is a C-tier clinical experience for me. Clinical experience number 11, community health volunteer. Many campuses have organizations that host community health fairs and health sites so that people without insurance or traditional access to healthcare can get their basic information. Their blood pressure, maybe some blood glucose, and for the most advanced organizations, maybe some way to connect them with insurance or longitudinal care. For me, I joined Vietnamese Community Health on the first day of my college career, and I stayed until my last. It was easily my most meaningful clinical experience because it gave meaning to why I worked so hard in the classroom and out of the classroom to try and be competitive for medical school. These organizations offer some way to increase your responsibility and involvement. experience. I started as a volunteer. Then the year after, I became the finance director. And the year after, I became the health site director. And to be clear, I'm using community health volunteer. I'm using this as kind of like a larger catch-all bucket that are clinical experiences that are aligned in some way to your identity or your passions and your interests. For me, this was serving the same Vietnamese and Hispanic populations that I grew up with that honestly raised me. For you, it may be a physical therapy assistant for physically disabled athletes because maybe you or someone in your family have a physical disability. Whatever the clinical experience, it must be unique and aligned with your story and the people, problems, or populations that you care most about. If you do, these clinical experiences are easily S tier. But if they're not aligned and you're just doing it because you're a monkey see, monkey doing a clinical experience that works for someone strange on Reddit, then it easily becomes a C or an F clinical experience. It has the bones certainly to be something special, but it may not be the right fit for you. Last but not least, number 12, medical interpreter or a translator. Becoming a medical interpreter has risen in popularity over the last couple of years. In this role, translators are trained very rigorously. They are active participants of care to very specific patients who would not otherwise be able to access care in English. Because they work with a specific subset of patients, every interaction is just that much more meaningful. There's an inherent language barrier, but there's also an inherent cultural barrier. I've read about student translators who describe patients who never wanted to know their blood pressure, because if it were high, it would mean that it was real and there would be something to do about it. These premeds often have a very strong understanding of culture, and it's really cool to see that many of them have reaffirmed that their life's purpose is to serve people from their communities, people that they resonate and identify with. It's really refreshing to read their descriptions of their work. You can tell it means a ton to them to care for people that they see as uncles and aunts. You can tell that it's very gratifying for these patients to thank them profusely for finally, for the first time, being able to actually understand what is going on in a doctor's visit. On top of that, you get paid. You're an active participant of care, and you develop a perspective on medicine that is extremely mature and nuanced, especially when you're referring to vulnerable populations. The only downside I can think of is that many students don't have that level of language proficiency. The job overall can be difficult to get with some pretty odd hours. For these reasons, being a medical interpreter gets an A from me. If you like this video, you'll love this one here about the framework that makes clinical experiences stand out. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.